The dinner at Sarah's. It all started with a simple invitation. "Would you like to have dinner at my place?" Sarah asked. Her voice was light, as if it was nothing special. But it wasn't nothing. I had known Sarah for years, since university. She was always just a little too perfect, smart, funny, a little mysterious. And then those eyes, gray and sharp like glass. So, of course, I said yes. Who wouldn't? The dinner was on a Friday evening. When I arrived at her apartment, I immediately noticed how different everything looked. Her place was small but stylish, just like her. Black and white photos on the walls, a modern couch, and a table already set for two. She smiled as she opened the door. "Right on time," she said. I stepped inside and was greeted by the delicious smell of food. Maybe pasta, or something with meat. It didn't matter. My stomach growled, and Sarah's charm made everything better. "Wine?" she asked, holding up a bottle. I nodded. We sat at the table, and the conversation flowed easily, as always. We talked about work, about old friends. But something felt different. Something I couldn't quite explain. Sarah looked at me a little too long before smiling again. "The main dish is almost ready," she said, standing up and walking to the kitchen. I stayed at the table, looking around. The apartment was perfect, maybe too perfect. No mess. No mistakes. It felt as if everything was planned too well. Then I heard it. A sound from the kitchen. A knife cutting against a wooden board. Rhythmic, almost aggressive. "What are you making?" I called out. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her smile wider than before. "You'll see soon," she said. But there was something in her eyes. Something that made me stop breathing for a second. She disappeared back into the kitchen, and I stayed at the table. The silence felt heavier now, almost pushing me to get up and follow her. But I didn't. I played with my glass of wine and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling growing inside me. After a few minutes, Sarah returned, carrying a large dish in her hands. The smell of roasted meat and spices filled the room. She placed the dish on the table and sat across from me, her eyes fixed on mine. "Try it," she said, serving me a piece of meat. I looked at my plate. The meat was cooked perfectly, covered in a shiny sauce. But the color, it was just a little too red. "What is it?" I asked, trying to sound casual. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up my fork. Sarah smiled, leaning forward. Her voice was soft. "A family recipe." I laughed a little, half because of her answer, half to calm myself down. I took a bite. The taste was amazing. Soft, full of flavor, with spices I couldn't quite recognize. "Delicious," I said, looking at her. But she wasn't eating. Her plate was empty. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Do you really like it?" she asked, her voice light, but her eyes sharp. I nodded. "Yes, absolutely." "What's in it?" She smiled again, but this time, it was different. There was something almost playful in her expression, like she was telling a joke that I didn't understand. "Secret," she said simply. The conversation continued, but the tension in the room grew. Sarah was watching me closely, studying my reactions. I realized I was eating faster than usual, as if I wanted to finish quickly. But every time I put my fork down, she served me more. "You have to eat everything," she said, her voice gentle but firm. I felt my stomach tighten, not because of the food, but because of the situation. Why wasn't she eating? Why was she looking at me like that, as if we shared a secret that I didn't know? When I finally took my last bite, she leaned forward. "Do you know what I love most about cooking?" she whispered. I shook my head, my throat suddenly dry. "You learn a lot about someone," she said. "Their taste, their limits, their instincts." My fork slipped from my hand, making a loud sound as it hit the plate. At that moment, I felt it, a cold, sickening fear rising from my stomach to my throat. I stared at her, my body frozen. The room suddenly felt smaller. "Instincts," I whispered. Sarah was still smiling, but her eyes were ice. She stood up, pushing her chair back, and walked to the kitchen. I heard drawers opening, the sound of metal clinking together. My thoughts spun in circles. Was this a joke? A test? Then, she returned, carrying a small plate. This time, it was dessert, a creamy dish, shining under a thin layer of caramel. She placed it in front of me. "This is the perfect ending," she said, sitting down again. "One bite, and everything makes sense." My hands fell heavy as I picked up the spoon. Sarah's gaze burned into me as I scooped up a bit of the dessert. But I hesitated. "Why aren't you eating?" I asked, my voice stronger than I expected. She leaned back again, crossing her arms. "I already ate," she said simply. I stared at the dessert in front of me, my spoon hovering just above it. The caramel layer glistened under the soft light, smooth and perfect. But my stomach felt tight. What is this all about, Sarah?" My voice was quieter than I wanted. Sarah tilted her head slightly, watching me with that same unreadable smile. Then, she laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You're finally asking the right question." Her expression turned serious. "I've been wondering about you for a while," she said. "What kind of person you really are. What you would do if something felt wrong." My breath quickened. "What do you mean?" She stood up slowly and walked to the window, staring outside for a moment. "People are predictable," she said. "They always want to believe the best. Even when their instincts tell them something is wrong, they try to convince themselves that everything is fine." She turned back to face me, her eyes dark and sharp. "Just like you're doing now." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "Sarah," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, "what did you do?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked back to the table, her movements slow and deliberate. "Nothing you didn't agree to," she finally said. "You chose to stay." You chose to eat. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. My mind raced. I pushed the dessert away. I think I should go. My chair scraped against the floor as I stood up. But before I could take a step toward the door, Sarah was already there. She moved fast, too fast. "Why the rush?" she asked, her voice light, almost playful. We were having such a nice evening. I swallowed hard. "Sarah, move." She didn't. Instead, she reached out and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. Her grip was strong, stronger than I expected. "You can leave," she whispered, "but just remember one thing." I looked at her, my breath shaky. "What you ate tonight stays with you, not just in your body, but in your mind." She let go of me. I grabbed my coat and rushed out the door. Outside, the cold night air hit me like a wave. I breathed in deeply, trying to clear my head, trying to shake off the feeling that something was terribly, horribly wrong. But even as I walked away, Sarah's last words echoed in my mind. "It stays with you." I walked quickly, almost running, my heart pounding in my chest. The cold air felt sharp against my skin, but it wasn't enough to clear my thoughts. What had just happened? I reached my apartment and locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking. I went straight to the bathroom, turned on the light, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with something between confusion and fear. Sarah's words echoed in my head. "It stays with you." I swallowed hard, pressing a hand to my stomach. I felt fine. No pain, no sickness. But my mind refused to rest. What had I eaten? I tried to push the thought away, but it kept creeping back. The meat, too red. The way she watched me. The fact that she never ate a single bite. I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on my face. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself. "I'm overthinking." But then, as I reached for a towel, I noticed something strange. My hands. They were steady now, but something felt off. My skin looked the same. My fingers moved the same way. And yet, there was a strange sensation, as if my body was adjusting to something unknown. A deep unease settled in my stomach. I walked to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my hands together, trying to shake off the feeling. I should sleep. Yes, sleep would help. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe Sarah had only been messing with me. I lay down, closing my eyes, forcing my body to relax. But as the night stretched on, sleep never came. Instead, my mind replayed every moment of that dinner. The knife against the cutting board, her sharp gaze, her words. And the worst part, somewhere, deep inside me, a voice whispered, "You already know the answer." The next morning, I woke up feeling strange. Not sick, not weak, just different. I sat up slowly, rubbing my face. My body felt normal, but my mind was restless. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Same face, same eyes. But as I stared longer, a cold shiver ran down my spine. My pupils. Were they slightly different? Just a little larger. I stepped back, my breath uneven. "Come down," I whispered. "It's nothing. Just your imagination." But the uneasiness wouldn't leave. I spent the day trying to distract myself, watching TV, reading, even going for a walk. But no matter what I did, I couldn't stop thinking about the dinner. The meat. Sarah's smile. Her words. "It stays with you." By the evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I grabbed my phone and searched for Sarah's number. My thumb hovered over the screen. What would I even say? "Hey, did you poison me?" Before I could decide, my phone buzzed. A message. From Sarah. "How are you feeling?" My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, my fingers cold. She knew. I wanted to ignore it, to pretend everything was fine. But I couldn't. Slowly, I typed back. "What did you do to me?" A few seconds passed. Then another message appeared. "I told you. It stays with you." I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. What does that mean? I typed quickly. This time, she took longer to reply. When her message finally came, I felt my stomach drop. "You'll find out soon." I stared at the words, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. My fingers felt cold. My body felt unfamiliar. Somewhere deep inside me, something was changing, and I didn't know what.